welcome back to your favorite Novi podcast, Now You Novi. This is an episode which was so fun for us to do, and I'm so excited to have Novi's favorite native Novi.
Maybe the only native, I don't know.
Favorite Novi, what are we called?
No, it wouldn't be Novivian. That wouldn't be good. No, I don't know. I don't know what you'd call us.
Oh, well, I'll just say favorite Novi native.
Okay, that sounds good.
Kathy Crawford.
Yes.
Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
You know, the last time you and I chatted a little bit about Novi's history,
yes,
was one of our most popular episodes.
Really? That's
yeah.
good. That's good.
So I had to have you back to keep our ratings up.
I hope so. You know, we don't want to see him tank just because I do something here.
No, you know, it was interesting. I was somewhere in the community and a lady got asked a question about Novi's history. And when she put it in, our podcast came up and she said it was so interesting to listen to.
That's
so
good.
Whoever that one resident is, we're back.
There's more. There's more residents
more
that are interested. You know what I find fascinating is that the more people move into Novi, especially people from other countries, they really want to know our history. Mm-hmm. You know, it sort of connects you to the community that you live in. It gives you pride in the community, which, you know, I grew up on a farm here and there was nothing here. I mean, when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, I didn't really notice that we didn't have anything like a doctor or a bank or a school, or we didn't have any of those things. And I didn't notice till all of a sudden I was having to go to other cities to go to school. I had to go to Northville Elementary. And then they shifted the school boundaries and I had to go to Wixom. And then I had to go to Walled Lake. And then I graduated from Farmington High School and never left Novi, lived in Novi. So it was weird back then. And when we went, like a lot of other Novi students, when we went to other communities, we were kind of looked down on as being backward. You're all farmers. They would speak slower to us. I mean, I think they thought we didn't even speak English at times. I think they just thought we were so, you know, country, which wasn't a bad thing, but you grew up feeling that. You know, when you went to these other communities and everything, you kind of felt like depressed about the fact that you didn't have all the things the other cities had.
So what was in Novi then? Like, if you can rewind and think back to your early days, what kind of farms? Well,
we had 350 acres.
Okay.
My dad couldn't afford to buy it. He couldn't afford to buy it back then because it would have cost way too much. But we had a gas station restaurant in the front. And I'll show you, I have a picture here of myself holding a puppy. And myself holding a puppy.
Aww.
And on our farm. And this went down Meadowbrook Road and Grand River, and then went all the way over to 10 Mile, where Willowbrook is now.
Okay.
And I have another picture that kind of shows you, it's me on a tractor, and it shows you the gas station in the front. And the long building there was the old Whitehall convalescent home, but it was a private residence at the time we lived there. So my grandparents ran the gas station in the front in the restaurant, and then my dad farmed the 350 acres. So there's a picture here of my dad and grandfather playing horseshoes right where Willowbrook is now.
Amazing.
Yeah. So a lot of changes, and people thought that if you didn't have a school or we had an old elementary school on Novi Road, right about where famous Dave's is now.
Okay.
So we had that, but when you got to be 8th grade, you had to go to another school, but I never even got to go to that school. So, you know, we rode the bus a lot to go to school.
I was going to ask, was it their bus then? So you took a bus?
Yeah. At one point in time, when we moved to a farm on 12 Mile and Haggerty, there was about a 45-acre farm there. We lived there. 2 of my sisters were going to Novi Elementary. My other sister was going to Northville, and then I was going to Farmington. So that house, I mean, when you think about it, different school systems, different holidays,
Sure.
I mean, my mother must have just been in the car all the time, going from Girl Scouts or whatever. We didn't even have Girl Scouts in Novi.
So this is back in the early 40s.
40s, yeah.
1940s.
40s and
40s and
50s.
50s. 1940s and 50s. What was Novi known for then? A farming community.
Yes.
But what kind of crops? What were people farming in Novi?
I would say mostly grains like wheat.
Okay.
We had a big wheat field where Willowbrook is. We had grains. We had just a few cows and a bull that got loose and ran all over Novi once. So, and we had pigs. So the farmers that were living here then were pretty self-sufficient. You didn't really go to the store. I mean, I didn't even have a canned good probably till I was 12 years old. I didn't even, even frozen foods, you didn't even have that because you had everything on the farm. The only thing, some dry goods, you would get feed sacks, and you would, if you wanted to have grain or whatever, you put your feed in feed sacks, and then you kept the feed sacks to make clothes. I mean, my grandmother made aprons out of the clothes. So in that farmhouse, if you can imagine, it was almost like Novi's early commune, because there was my dad's mom and dad who ran the gas station. Then there was my deaf aunt and uncle who had 2 girls, because at that time in the 40s and 50s, they didn't think people who were deaf were capable of living by themselves. So they lived with us on the farm too and helped out. My aunt was kind of in charge of anything that involved bleeding or screaming, like combing hair and braiding hair, because she didn't hear all the screaming. She didn't care if you were bleeding, So she did all that kind of stuff. So it was a great way to grow up, really. Now that I think about it.
It sounds like it was.
Yeah, it was great.
Where did Novi's, apple orchards, how did that come about? Because Novi, as you know, as things built out throughout Novi, a lot of the properties were laced with arsenic from the apple orchards, right? Yeah. So Novi at some point was known for apple orchards too.
Yeah. We were known for apple orchards. Well, first of all, just to go back further, Grand River has been the main road since, actually it was a trail in the 1700s. Okay. So we had a lot of trails in the 1700s. I think we have a picture of some of the other trails. There was a Shiawassee Trail, the Saginaw Trail. Grand River was also a trail that can you even imagine? There were buffalo herds that roamed the area back in the 1700s. Okay. So because Grand River was a trail that was well used by animals, and then also followed by Native Americans, and they would go from Fort Pontchartrain in Detroit all the way out Grand River and maybe go all the way to Grand Rapids area, go to the other side of the state. So Grand River became a main transport. It was even called a turnpike back in the 1800s. We can imagine that. 3 lanes. It was called a turnpike. It was called the Grand River, the Detroit Howell Turnpike. That's what it was called. So, we never thought of it as a turnpike. It was just, but that history started way back, and we had a number of Native Americans that lived in the area, especially around the lake. Lots of fishing. Wild Lake was very popular for fishing. So people came. But Grand River also was one of the very few, in 1820, it was the first plank road. So the planks, they realized, they made a 10-year plan back in 1820, if you can imagine this, because what did we have in Novi and the whole area was forest. So they cut down all the trees, and they used these planks to make a road. So it was one of the first plank roads in the entire state. Even before we became a state, Novi became a metropolis, I think, for back in the day, because we had everything. We had a blacksmith, we had a hotel. Actually, it's on a book that you can pick up at the library. The picture of the hotel right here was even before Botsford Inn. A lot of people think Botsford Inn was the first hotel. But no, Novi had the first hotel in the 1800s. And then we had a blacksmith, we had 2 general stores.
Right. So what happened? So in the late 1800s, Novi became a stop on the trail, right? From Detroit to Howell, or on the turnpike, really. Novi on the turnpike.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What happened to I'm assuming this was at what was called the Four Corners, so Novi
Yes.
Road and Grand River, right there. What did these businesses, as other cities became populated, just fell by the wayside and went into disrepair? So y'all didn't have those then growing up, and what happened to them?
I think in the 1800s, we were actually a destination because we had a plank road. And the Novi Road also was a plank road. So ease of access was really important back then. So I think that's one of the reasons why our cemetery has veterans from the American Revolution. I mean, when other communities that are much larger around us don't even have one veteran buried in their cemetery from the American Revolution, we have more than one. We have veterans from the War of 1812. We have veterans from the Civil War, all buried in our little cemetery, our little 2.5 acre cemetery right on Novi Road, because it was a plank road. People could get their carriages down there. You could also go down Grand River. And the general stores were sort of like the Walmart of the day back then. So even if you were self-sufficient on your farm, like my family was, you didn't have dry goods necessarily, or if you wanted to buy pots and pans, or, I mean, Matt Morin, one of the descriptions of the inside of Matt Morin's store was the fact that you could get tobacco, a Bowie knife, a wedding dress, and, and alcohol, all in one room, one small room. You could get all of that stuff. So it was just loaded. And so was Mr. Goodell's store. And Mr. Goodell actually, before the Four Corners where we had, where they built a building, he actually went in a covered wagon around to the farmers, and he took all his pots and pans and sort of like a mini store in a wagon around to the local, farmers in Novi. We had a lot
He was the Amazon Prime of his day, right?
He was. So he thought, I'm getting old now. I'm not going to. I mean, one of the accounts anyway that we see in the Historical Commission room is that one of the accounts said, he got older and he decided, well, you know what? At the Four Corners, where it's a metropolis, I'll just build a store there. And we had a millinery. We had a lot of sheep. There were more sheep in Novi than entire Oakland County, I think. We were known for our sheep. So we have a wool house, and the building on Grand River is actually still standing where the wool house was, where you would take your wool, you would when you would shear your sheep, then you would take the wool to the wool house, and you would be paid for the wool.
What building is this, Kathy?
It's like, I'm trying to describe now. It's a building that is right on Grand River, just west of the MSU, now the MSU
the Federal
Bank.
Credit Union.
Yeah, the credit union. So just past that, it's a building that just looks kind of long. It also was a grocery store at one time. And that was the wool house. So it's still there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. One of the few buildings that we still have standing. We just never really had a lot of buildings. A lot of people think, if you have a lot of, like Northville has all the beautiful Victorian homes, and so does Farmington. We just didn't have that because we were spread out, the large farms with acreage and everything. So that was the way it was. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What's your favorite memory as a child? If you could go back, and what would be your favorite memory?
There's so many, but one of the things that was great fun that I'm sure kids today never have an opportunity to do, we had in the barn, there were big bins, like areas where you would put your grain, like after the grain was dry, or, after the grain was cut and everything, the wheat and everything, you would put your grains in these areas of the barn, and they were separated, and we kids would play in the grain. It was just, it would be like playing in a barrel of rice or something. It was very, very fun. That plus hiding in the cornfields, was always something that was great fun. But I wasn't real fond of, because my dad had 4 girls, I wasn't real fond of picking the vegetables every morning, because we had a vegetable stand out on Grand River. And, us kids would have to do that. So it was a memory, but it wasn't a fond memory of having to get out there early in the morning and pick corn and green beans and that kind of thing. So
I love chatting and just kind of envisioning the Novi of yesterday. Just, when you think about our community today.
Yes.
Just 80 years forward, right? It's amazing to think of where we've come and all of those that came before us to get us to where we are. I just, you go west and you think, bigger lots, but you really need to go past Brighton, past Howell to even find farming along Grand River anymore.
Yeah.
So it just the natural progression of how things moved in 80 years ago.
And I think one thing that hasn't changed much is I still think there is sort of a mental picture that farmers just are not well educated. They're not, the farmers of today have got college degrees.
I was going to say, I know a lot of farmers in David's family. They're smartest people.
But when I was growing, they're almost like
working.
Scientists. Yeah, they're like scientists, really, because they have to know about the soil and they have to know so much about the weather patterns and so many other things. And it's just not practical for a person to have 3 or 4 cows. You have to have lots of acreage. Even our 350 acres would not have been enough. We had chickens and we had turkeys and we had everything on that farm. But today, in order to operate a farm, you would have to have hundreds of acres. Hundreds and hundreds, maybe 2,000 acres. I don't know. A lot of our farms are up north, even in the UP. So, but these farmers now are like scientists. Nothing at all like my dad, the guys that came up from Tennessee when Henry Ford was down recruiting people to come north to work in the auto plants. That's when my grandfather and grandmother came. And brought my dad and his deaf sister, because Detroit had one of the few schools for the deaf too. So that was part of the reason why they came.
Okay.
But they knew how to fix anything because the farmers actually learned how to, they couldn't afford to send their farm-all tractor over to somebody to fix it. They had to learn how to fix all their own stuff.
Right.
They had to know. And they were about the smartest people too, but they didn't have college degrees back then. Now they do.
Yeah.
Now they do.
Well, I love chatting with you. I thank you for sharing a little bit of the past and a reflection on Novi. We're going to continue these chats because they always pique my interest. One of the times we talk, I want to say and I'll save it, but what put Novi in the map? And I want you to think about that.
Yeah.
Because you have lived here all of your life.
Yeah, I do know what put it on the map.
And so we'll talk a little bit about that, okay?
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for sharing.
So happy to be here. I love, the Historical Commission, this is our goal, really, to share the stories, because pretty soon we're not going to have people who have lived through, 80 years or so to tell the story.
Right.
We've got some written accounts, but not much.
I love it. I love it. It's important too. I maybe we should end with that. The Historical Commission, how active they are in sharing this, and the historical room for those that are interested. The library has an entire room dedicated to Novi history, right?
On the second floor, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're getting more and more information because the more people find out and they're interested, they come to the room and they want to look up their ancestry and everything. So we're getting new equipment so people will be able to get even more information.
That's awesome.
So it's great.
That's awesome.
People want to know where they came from and what it was like back in the day. A lot of the young people from the high school have a lot of questions about, well, what was it like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and just think way back when that little girl playing in the cornfields would be sitting here today talking about Novi's history, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And there you have it. A little bit of Novi's history from Novi's favorite native, Kathy Crawford. Now you Novi.
Now you Novi.
Take care.